I stood there in my best dress, holding the wedding invitation in my trembling hands, while my daughter-in-law Sarah laughed right in my face. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Williams," she said with that fake sweet voice of hers, "but your name isn't on the guest list." The security guard looked at me like I was some crazy old lady trying to crash a party. My heart was beating so fast I thought it might jump out of my chest. After everything I had done for this family, after all the years I had loved and supported them, I wasn't even allowed into my own grandson's wedding. But what Sarah didn't know was that in just 5 minutes, I would be walking onto that stage. And when I did, everyone in that wedding hall would learn the truth about who I really was. The shock on her face would be worth every tear I had cried over the past year. You see, sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones we least expect. And sometimes the best revenge is simply letting the truth come to light. Comment below, as I'd love to hear your thought, and subscribe to the channel to help us hit that big 5,000 subscriber milestone. We're so close, and every single one counts. It's free for you, but it means everything to this channel. And hey, while you're at it, I've left a video and also a link to a playlist on the final screen that I promise will surprise you. Seriously, don't miss them. Thanks so much for watching all the way through. Now go hit that button and be part of the journey. Let me start from the beginning so you can understand how I ended up in this mess. My name is Margaret Williams, and I'm 72 years old. I've lived a good life, raised 3 wonderful children, and worked hard every single day to take care of my family. My husband Robert passed away 5 years ago, leaving me alone in our big house on Maple Street. My youngest son Michael has always been special to me. Maybe it's because he was born when I was older, or maybe it's because he looks just like his father, with those bright blue eyes and that crooked smile. When Michael brought Sarah home 3 years ago, I was so happy. I thought finally my baby boy had found someone to love him the way he deserved. Sarah seemed perfect at first. She was pretty with long blonde hair and green eyes that sparkled when she laughed. She worked as a nurse at the local hospital and always talked about helping people. She would come to Sunday dinners and compliment my cooking. She would ask about my garden and seem interested in my stories about the old days. "You're so lucky to have such a wonderful mother," she would tell Michael while squeezing my hand. "I hope I can be half as good to our children someday." I believed every word. I welcomed her into our family with open arms and an open heart. When Michael proposed to Sarah 2 years later, I cried happy tears. I had saved money for years, keeping it in a special account that Robert and I called our family fund. We always planned to help our children when they needed it most. After Robert died, I decided that this money would be my gift to help Michael start his new life. The wedding planning began, and I was so excited to be part of it. Sarah asked me to come dress shopping with her and her mother. We spent hours looking at flowers and tasting cakes. I offered to pay for the wedding venue, which cost $15,000. It was a beautiful place called Golden Gardens, with crystal chandeliers and marble floors. "Are you sure, Mom?" Michael asked when I told him about my gift. "That's a lot of money." "Honey, this is what your father and I saved for," I said, patting his cheek the way I used to when he was little. "We want you to have the wedding of your dreams." Sarah hugged me so tight that day. "You're the best mother-in-law in the world," she whispered in my ear. "I love you so much." Those words made my heart sing. I had always wanted a daughter, and I thought Sarah was the answer to my prayers. As the months went by, I helped with everything. I addressed hundreds of wedding invitations by hand because Sarah said it would look more elegant. I spent weekends helping her pick out decorations. I even offered to make the wedding favors myself. Little bags of homemade cookies that took me days to bake and package. Sarah seemed grateful for everything I did. She would call me almost every day to talk about wedding plans or just to chat. Sometimes she would stop by my house after work, and we would sit on the porch drinking tea and talking about life. I never had a close relationship with my own mother. She told me one evening as we watched the sunset. She was always too busy with her own problems, but you make me feel like I have a real mom for the first time. I felt tears in my eyes when she said that. I had lost my own mother when I was young, so I understood how important it was to have someone who cared about you like a parent should. But things started to change about 6 months before the wedding. Sarah began acting different. She would cancel our shopping trips at the last minute. When I called to check on wedding plans, she would sound annoyed and tell me she had everything under control. "I think Sarah is just stressed about the wedding," Michael explained when I mentioned my concerns. "You know how brides get. She'll be back to normal after everything is over." I tried to believe him. I told myself that wedding planning was hard work, and Sarah probably just needed some space. But deep in my heart, something felt wrong. The first real sign of trouble came when I asked about my invitation. All my friends had received theirs weeks ago, but mine never arrived. When I called Sarah to ask about it, she sounded surprised. "Oh, I must have forgotten to put your address on the list," she said. "Don't worry, you don't need an invitation, you're family." But I did worry. Something in her voice didn't sound right. It sounded cold. A few days later, I ran into Sarah's mother, Linda, at the grocery store. We chatted about the wedding, and she mentioned how excited she was about the guest list. 200 people, she said with a big smile. "Sarah showed me the whole list. It's going to be such a beautiful celebration." "Did you see my name on there?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Linda looked confused. "Your name? Well, I'm sure it was there somewhere. There were so many names." But I could tell from her face that she hadn't seen my name, and that scared me more than I wanted to admit. The next week, I decided to stop by the wedding venue to check on some details. I had paid for it after all, so I figured I had the right to make sure everything was going smoothly. The event coordinator, a nice woman named Jessica, greeted me warmly. "Mrs. Williams, how wonderful to see you. The bride's family was just here yesterday going over final details." "Oh, good," I said. "I hope everything is coming together nicely." "It's going to be gorgeous," Jessica said, pulling out a thick folder. "Would you like to see the seating chart? Sarah and her mother spent hours working on it." She spread out a large piece of paper covered with table numbers and names. I scanned it carefully, looking for my name. I checked every table twice, then 3 times. My name was nowhere to be found. "I don't see where I'm supposed to sit," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Jessica looked confused. She checked the chart again, then flipped through some papers in her folder. "That's strange," she said. "Let me check the guest list." She pulled out another paper and ran her finger down the names. After a few minutes, she looked up at me with a worried expression. "Mrs. Williams, I'm so sorry, but I don't see your name on the guest list either. There must be some mistake." My legs felt weak. I had to sit down in one of the chairs nearby. "But I'm the groom's mother," I said quietly, "and I paid for this venue." Jessica's eyes went wide. "You're Michael's mother? But Sarah told us his mother lived far away and couldn't make it to the wedding." The room started spinning around me. I felt like I might throw up. "She said what?" "I'm so sorry," Jessica said, sitting down next to me. "This is clearly a misunderstanding. Let me call the bride right now and sort this out." But I stopped her. Something told me that calling Sarah wouldn't help. In fact, it might make things worse. "Don't call her," I said, standing up slowly. "I need to figure this out myself." I drove home in a daze. How could Sarah lie about me to the wedding venue? How could she plan to have the wedding I paid for without even inviting me? When I got home, I called Michael immediately. "Honey, we need to talk," I said, when he answered. "What's wrong, Mom? You sound upset." "I went to the wedding venue today and they told me my name isn't on the guest list. They said Sarah told them I lived far away and couldn't come." There was a long silence on the phone. "That can't be right," Michael finally said. There must be some confusion. Let me talk to Sarah and call you back." He hung up, and I waited. I paced around my kitchen for 2 hours, checking the clock every few minutes. When Michael finally called back, his voice sounded strange. "Mom, Sarah says there was a mix-up with the guest list. She's going to add your name right away." "Michael," I said carefully, "do you believe that's really what happened?" Another long pause. I'm sure it's just wedding stress. Sarah has been really overwhelmed lately." But I could hear doubt in his voice. My son was starting to realize that something wasn't right either. The next morning, Sarah called me. Her voice was sugar-sweet, just like it used to be. "Margaret, I am so sorry about the confusion with the guest list. I don't know how that happened. You're definitely invited. I'm sending your invitation today." "Thank you," I said, but I didn't mean it. Trust, once broken, is hard to fix. True to her word, an invitation arrived the next day. But when I opened it, something was wrong. The invitation was addressed to Mrs. Robert Williams and guest, not Mrs. Bumby, Margaret Williams. And the table number written in pencil looked like it had been added at the last minute. I was being treated like a distant relative who had been added to the list as an afterthought. This was my son's wedding, paid for with my money, and I was being treated like I didn't matter. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the signs I had missed. How Sarah had gradually stopped including me in wedding plans. How she had started acting cold whenever I asked questions. How she had lied to the wedding venue about who I was. But why would she want to exclude me? What had I done to make her treat me this way? I thought back over the past few months, trying to remember any arguments or disagreements we might have had. But I couldn't think of any. If anything, I had gone out of my way to be supportive and helpful. Then I remembered something that happened about 2 months ago. Sarah had been talking about the guest list and mentioned that they had to cut some people because the venue had a limit. "It's so hard," she had said. "We want to invite everyone, but we just can't afford it." "Well, you don't need to worry about the cost," I had said. "I already paid for the venue, remember?" The look on Sarah's face had been strange, almost angry. But she had quickly smiled and changed the subject. Now I wondered if that was when things started to change. Had I said something wrong? Had I made her feel bad somehow? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that Sarah had been pushing me out of the wedding planning ever since that conversation. And now she was trying to push me out of the wedding altogether. But I still didn't understand why. 3 days before the wedding, I got a call that changed everything. It was from Jessica at the wedding venue. "Mrs. Williams, I'm calling because there's been another problem with your son's wedding." My heart started racing. "What kind of problem?" "Well, the bride came in today with a man I've never seen before. She introduced him as her brother and asked us to add him to the guest list as part of the wedding party." "Okay," I said, not understanding why this was a problem. "But Mrs. Williams, when I checked our records, Sarah had already told us she was an only child. And this man, he seemed much older than her, maybe in his 50s. A cold feeling crept up my spine. "Did you ask her about it?" "I did, and she got very angry. She said it was none of my business and that I should just do what she asked. But Mrs. Williams, I've been doing weddings for 15 years, and something feels very wrong about this whole situation." Jessica paused, then continued in a lower voice. "There's something else. I overheard her talking to this man about money. She said something about making sure everything goes according to plan, and that after the wedding they would have enough to start over somewhere new." My blood turned to ice. "Jessica, what exactly did she say?" "I couldn't hear everything, but she mentioned something about a big payout and disappearing after the honeymoon. Mrs. Williams, I think you need to talk to your son right away." I hung up the phone with shaking hands. Sarah wasn't just excluding me from the wedding, she was planning something much worse. But what? And who was this mysterious man she was calling her brother? I had to find out the truth, but I knew Sarah would never tell me. And I wasn't even sure if Michael would believe me if I tried to warn him. That's when I decided to do something I had never done before in my life. I was going to spy on Sarah. The next evening, I parked my car down the street from Sarah's apartment and waited. I felt terrible about what I was doing, but I had to protect my son. At around 8 o'clock, Sarah came out of her building with a man I had never seen before. He was older, like Jessica had said, with gray hair and expensive clothes. They walked to his car, a fancy red convertible, and drove away. I followed them at a distance, my heart pounding the whole time. They went to a restaurant on the other side of town, someplace fancy that I had never been to. I parked where I could see them through the window and watched as they talked over dinner. Even from far away, I could see that this wasn't a normal family meeting. The man kept leaning forward and gesturing with his hands, like he was explaining something important. Sarah kept nodding and looking around nervously. Then something happened that made my stomach drop. The man reached across the table and took Sarah's hand, not like a brother would hold his sister's hand, like a man holding his girlfriend's hand. And Sarah didn't pull away. She squeezed back. I sat in my car, watching the woman my son was about to marry hold hands with another man, and I felt like my world was falling apart. Sarah wasn't just lying about this man being her brother. She was cheating on Michael. But why would she marry Michael if she was in love with someone else? Then I remembered what Jessica had overheard about money and starting over somewhere new, and suddenly everything became clear. Sarah wasn't marrying Michael because she loved him. She was marrying him for money. My money. The $15,000 I had given for the wedding venue was just the beginning. She probably thought that once she was married to my son, she would have access to everything I owned. And after the wedding, she was planning to disappear with this other man. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the steering wheel. I had to warn Michael. I had to stop this wedding before it was too late. But when I got home and called my son, he wasn't answering his phone. I tried 5 times, but it went straight to voicemail each time. I didn't sleep at all that night. I kept thinking about what I had seen and trying to figure out what to do. Should I go to the police? Should I show up at the wedding and make a scene? By morning, I had made my decision. I was going to that wedding, whether Sarah wanted me there or not. I was going to find a way to tell Michael the truth before he made the biggest mistake of his life. I put on my best dress, the blue one that Robert always said brought out my eyes. I did my hair and put on the pearl earrings that had been my mother's. If this was going to be a showdown, I was going to look my best. When I arrived at Golden Gardens, my heart was beating so fast I thought everyone would be able to hear it. The parking lot was full of cars, and I could hear music coming from inside the building. I walked up to the entrance where a young man in a black suit was checking names off a list. "Good afternoon," I said, trying to sound confident. "I'm Margaret Williams." He scanned his list, then looked up at me with confusion. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I don't see that name here." "I'm the groom's mother," I said, showing him my invitation. He looked at the invitation, then back at his list. "Let me get the wedding coordinator," he said, disappearing inside. A minute later, Sarah appeared at the door. She was wearing a beautiful white dress and had her hair piled up in an elegant style. She looked like a princess. She also looked like she had seen a ghost when she saw me standing there. "Margaret," she said, but her voice wasn't friendly. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here for my son's wedding," I said calmly, just like the invitation said. Sarah stepped closer to me, and I could see anger flashing in her green eyes. "I'm sorry, but your name isn't on the list," she said, loud enough for other guests to hear. The security guard looked at me like I was some crazy old woman trying to crash a party. Other guests were starting to stare. I felt my face getting hot with embarrassment. "But I have an invitation," I said, holding it up. Sarah barely glanced at it. "That must be a mistake," she said with a cold smile. "I'm sorry, but you'll have to leave." I stood there in shock. still holding my invitation, while Sarah turned around and walked back into the building, like nothing had happened. The security guard stepped closer to me. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," he said, not unkindly, but firmly. I looked through the glass doors and could see the wedding ceremony about to begin. My son was standing at the altar in his black tuxedo, looking handsome and happy. He had no idea what was about to happen to his life. I had two choices. I could leave quietly and let Sarah destroy my son, or I could find another way to stop this disaster. That's when I remembered something that Sarah didn't know, something that was about to change everything. I walked back to my car with as much dignity as I could manage, but I didn't drive away. Instead, I sat there and made a phone call. A very important phone call. "Hello, Jessica," I said when the wedding coordinator answered. "It's Margaret Williams. I need to ask you a favor, and I need you to trust me. In about 10 minutes, I'm going to need you to announce that there's been a last-minute change to the ceremony program." 20 minutes later, I was standing backstage in the Golden Gardens event hall, my heart pounding like a drum. Through the curtains, though, I could see Sarah and Michael at the altar, about to say their vows. The minister had just asked if anyone objected to the marriage, and the room was silent. That's when Jessica stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue, we have a very special surprise. Please welcome to the stage someone who has been working behind the scenes to make this day perfect." And that's when I stepped out from behind the curtain and walked onto that stage, right in front of Sarah and 200 wedding guests. The look of absolute terror on Sarah's face was something I will never forget, as long as I live. I walked across that stage like I owned the place, which in a way I did. After all, I had paid for it. The spotlight was so bright I could barely see the faces in the crowd, but I could feel every single person staring at me. The silence in that room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Sarah's face had gone completely white. She was gripping her bouquet so tight I thought the flowers might break. Michael looked confused, turning his head back and forth between me and his bride, like he was watching a tennis match. "Hello, everyone," I said into the microphone, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'm Margaret Williams, Michael's mother." A murmur went through the crowd. I could hear people whispering to each other, asking who I was and why I was interrupting the ceremony. Sarah took a step toward me, her eyes blazing with anger. "What are you doing?" she hissed under her breath, but the microphone picked it up and everyone heard. I smiled at her, the same sweet smile she used to give me when she was pretending to love me. "I'm just here to share some special news with everyone, dear." Michael stepped forward, looking embarrassed. "Mom, what's going on? This isn't the time or place?" "Actually, son," I said, looking right at him, "this is exactly the right time and place." I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Sarah's eyes went wide when she saw it. She knew exactly what it was. "You see, everyone," I continued, speaking to the crowd, "there's something very important that you all should know about this wedding. Something that Sarah forgot to mention." The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Even the minister looked like he was holding his breath. This beautiful venue, Golden Gardens, was paid for by me. The flowers, the music, the dinner you're all about to enjoy, all of it came from money I've been saving for years to help my son start his new life. More whispers from the crowd. I could see people nodding and smiling, probably thinking this was going to be a sweet speech about a mother's love. If only they knew what was coming next. "But that's not the most interesting part," I said, unfolding the paper in my hands. "The most interesting part is what I discovered when I did a little research about the bride." Sarah looked like she was going to faint. She grabbed Michael's arm for support, but he was staring at me with a confused expression. "What kind of research?" Michael asked. I looked at my son, and my heart broke a little. He was about to learn that the woman he loved had been lying to him about everything, but he needed to know the truth. Well, I said, I started wondering why Sarah didn't want me at this wedding. Why she told the venue coordinator that Michael's mother lived far away and couldn't attend. Why she tried to keep me off the guest list. I could see people in the audience turning to look at Sarah. A few women in the front row were shaking their heads with disapproving looks. So I hired a private investigator, I continued, and what he found out was very, very interesting. That was a lie. I hadn't hired a private investigator. But I had done some digging on my own, and what I found was enough to stop this wedding. Sarah suddenly stepped forward, snatching the microphone from my hands. That's enough, she said, her voice shaking. Security! Get this crazy woman out of here! But the security guard wasn't moving. He was listening to every word, just like everyone else. Michael took the microphone from Sarah and handed it back to me. Mom, just tell us what you found out. I looked at my sweet boy standing there in his wedding tuxedo, and I wished I didn't have to break his heart. But sometimes being a good mother means doing things that hurt in the moment, but protect your children in the long run. Sarah isn't who she says she is, I said simply. The crowd gasped. Sarah started to say something, but I held up my hand to stop her. Her real name is Sarah Michelle Connor, not Sarah Michelle Thompson, like she told you, Michael, and she's been married before. 3 times, actually. The gasps got louder. I could hear someone in the back of the room say, "Oh my God," loud enough for everyone to hear. Michael's face went pale. That can't be true, he said, looking at Sarah. Sarah, tell them that's not true. But Sarah wasn't saying anything. She was just standing there looking like a trapped animal. It gets worse, I continued. Each of those marriages ended the same way. Sarah would marry a man, gain access to his money, and then disappear with her boyfriend, a man named Rick Morrison, who she's been with for the past 8 years. Now the crowd was really buzzing. People were standing up, trying to get a better view of what was happening. Some were taking pictures with their phones. Mom, stop, Michael said, his voice cracking. This is crazy. Sarah loves me. We're getting married. I walked over to my son and put my hand on his cheek, just like I used to when he was little and needed comfort. Honey, Rick Morrison is here today. Sarah introduced him to the venue coordinator as her brother. But he's not her brother, Michael. He's the man she's planning to run away with after she gets access to your bank accounts. Sarah finally found her voice. You're lying, she screamed. You're a jealous old woman who can't stand to see your son happy. But her protest sounded weak, even to her own ears. And that's when someone in the crowd started laughing. It was a man's voice, coming from the back of the room. Everyone turned to look, and there he was, Rick Morrison, standing up from his seat at the pommel 12, clapping his hands slowly. Well, 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 Rick said, walking toward the stage. Looks like the old lady figured it out. Sarah's face went from white to green. Rick, what are you doing? Sit down. But Rick kept walking until he was standing right at the foot of the stage, grinning up at all of us like this was the most entertaining thing he'd ever seen. You know what, Sarah? He said loud enough for everyone to hear. I'm getting tired of this whole charade anyway. This kid is boring. His family is annoying, and frankly, I don't think he's got as much money as you promised me he did. The room exploded. People were shouting, some were laughing, others were booing. Michael looked like he might throw up right there on the altar. Sarah, he said quietly, is this true? Have you been lying to me this whole time? Sarah looked around the room like a cornered animal. Her perfect wedding was falling apart in front of 200 people, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Michael, I can explain, she started to say. But Rick wasn't finished. Explain what? He said with a nasty laugh. How you were going to clean out his bank account on your honeymoon. How you already transferred the money his mommy gave you for the wedding into our joint account. How we were supposed to be on a plane to Mexico tomorrow morning. That's when Michael finally snapped. "Get out!" he screamed so loud that everyone in the room jumped. "Both of you, get out of here right now!" Sarah started crying, but they weren't real tears. They were the fake kind she was so good at. "Michael, please let me explain. I do love you. I was going to call off the whole thing with Rick, I swear." But Michael wasn't listening anymore. He ripped off his boutonniere and threw it on the floor, then started walking toward the exit. "Son, wait!" I called after him. He turned around, and I could see tears in his eyes. "Did you know?" he asked me. "Did you know all of this before today?" I thought about lying to protect his feelings, but we'd had enough lies for one day. I suspected something was wrong. I saw them together at a restaurant 2 nights ago. That's when I knew for sure. Michael nodded slowly. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Thank you for saving me from making the biggest mistake of my life." Then he walked out of the room, leaving Sarah standing there in her wedding dress with mascara running down her face. The crowd was in chaos. Some people were leaving. Others were taking pictures, and a few were even applauding. Sarah finally realized that her perfect plan had completely fallen apart. She gathered up her dress and ran toward the exit, but not before stopping right in front of me. "This isn't over," she whispered in my ear. "You have no idea what you've done." Then she was gone, running out of the building in her white dress with Rick close behind her. I stood there on the stage, looking out at the confused crowd of wedding guests, and suddenly felt very tired. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation was wearing off, and I realized that my legs were shaking. Jessica, the venue coordinator, appeared at my side. "Mrs. Williams, are you okay? Do you need to sit down?" "I think I need some air," I said. She helped me off the stage and out to the garden patio behind the building. The fresh air felt good on my face, and I sat down on a bench surrounded by roses. "Mrs. Williams," Jessica said, sitting down next to me, "I have to ask, how did you know to look into Sarah's background?" I thought about how to answer that. "I guess it was a mother's instinct," I said finally. Something just felt wrong. She was trying too hard to push me out of my son's life, and I couldn't understand why. "What made you decide to confront her here at the wedding?" "Because I knew this was the only place where she couldn't run away or make excuses. With all these witnesses, she had to face the truth." Jessica nodded. "You saved your son from making a terrible mistake." "I hope so," I said. "But I'm worried about him. He really loved her, you know. Even if she was lying, his feelings were real." Just then I heard footsteps on the gravel path. I looked up and saw Michael walking toward us. He had taken off his tuxedo jacket and tie, and his hair was messy, like he'd been running his hands through it. "Mom," he said, sitting down on the bench next to me. "How are you holding up, sweetheart?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I feel like such an idiot," he said finally. "How could I not see what she was doing? How could I be so blind?" "Love makes us blind sometimes," I said, taking his hand. "She was very good at pretending. She fooled me too at first. But you figured it out. Why didn't I?" I squeezed his hand. "Because you have a good heart, Michael. You trusted her because that's the kind of person you are. Don't let this change that about you." We sat there in silence for a while, watching the sun set behind the trees. I could hear the sounds of the wedding guests inside, probably wondering what they were supposed to do now. "What happens now?" Michael asked. "I mean, all these people are here, and we've got all this food and music." "Well," I said, standing up and brushing off my dress, "I paid for this party, and I'm not about to let it go to waste. What do you say we go inside and have a celebration anyway?" "A celebration of what?" "Of the truth, of family, and of the fact that you dodged a bullet today." For the first time since the ceremony fell apart, Michael smiled. "You know what, Mom? That sounds like a pretty good idea. We walked back inside together, and I was surprised to see that most of the guests were still there. They looked up when we entered, not sure what to expect. I walked over to the band leader and asked him to give me the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, "I know this wasn't the wedding you were expecting to attend today, but I'd like to invite all of you to stay and help us celebrate something even better, the truth, and the love of family and real friends." The crowd started clapping, and someone in the back yelled, "Here's to Margaret Williams!" Soon, everyone was cheering and clapping. The band started playing music, and people began moving toward the dinner tables. It turned out to be one of the best parties I'd ever been to. Throughout the evening, people kept coming up to me to shake my hand and tell me how brave I was. Michael's friends were patting him on the back and telling him he was lucky to have a mother like me. Even some of Sarah's family members apologized and said they'd had their doubts about her too. But the best part was watching Michael start to relax and even laugh a little. He danced with me to our favorite old song, and for a moment, it felt like he was my little boy again, and everything was going to be okay. As the party was winding down, Jessica came over to me with a concerned look on her face. "Mrs. Williams, I hate to bring this up, but there's something you should know. When Sarah ran out of here, she took some things from the gift table." "What kind of things?" "The card box, for one. It had all the wedding gift money in it, and she also took some of the wedding presents." I felt a surge of anger. But then I realized something. "Jessica, did she take the gifts that were already opened?" "No, just the unopened ones. And the cards." I started laughing, which made Jessica look at me like I'd lost my mind. "Mrs. Williams, are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said, wiping tears of laughter from my eyes. "It's just that Sarah is in for a very unpleasant surprise when she opens those cards." "What do you mean?" "Well, most of the wedding gifts were supposed to be shipped directly to Michael's house. The only presents that were brought here today were from people who didn't know about the registry. And as for the cards—" I paused, thinking about all those envelopes full of checks made out to Mr. and Mrs. Michael Williams. Those checks are worthless to her now. She can't cash them without being married to Michael, and after what happened today, I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen. Jessica started laughing too. "So she basically stole a bunch of useless paper?" "Pretty much. Plus some toasters and picture frames from people who shopped at the last minute." As I was getting ready to leave, Michael walked me to my car. "Mom, I need to ask you something," he said, as I was putting my purse in the passenger seat. "What is it, baby? Honey?" "How did you really find out about Sarah's past? I mean, you said you hired a private investigator, but then you said you saw her with that guy Rick at a restaurant. Which one was it?" I looked at my son, this man who had just had his heart broken and his whole world turned upside down, and I decided he deserved the complete truth. "I didn't hire a private investigator," I admitted. "I was so worried about you that I followed her one night. I saw her with Rick at that restaurant and I knew something was wrong. So I did some research on my own." "What kind of research?" "I looked her up online. I found her social media accounts under her real name. I found newspaper articles about her previous marriages and divorces. I even found a forum where women were warning each other about dating scams, and Rick's picture was all over it." Michael shook his head in amazement. "Mom, you're like a one-woman detective agency." "I'm just a mother who loves her son," I said. "And I wasn't about to let anyone hurt you if I could help it." He hugged me tight. "I love you, Mom. And I'm sorry I didn't listen when you tried to warn me that something was wrong." "You weren't ready to hear it then," I said. "Sometimes we have to learn things the hard way." As I drove home that night, I felt a mixture of emotions. I was relieved that Michael was safe from Sarah's scheme. I was proud that I had found the courage to stand up and speak the truth. But I was also sad for my son, who had to learn that the woman he loved had been using him. And there was something else bothering me. Something Sarah had whispered in my ear before she ran out of the wedding. "This isn't over. You have no idea what you've done." What did she mean by that? Was she planning some kind of revenge? I tried to push the thought out of my mama as I got ready for bed. Sarah and Rick were probably halfway to Mexico by now, and I'd never see either of them again. But as I was brushing my teeth, I heard a sound outside that made my blood run cold. It was the sound of gravel crunching in my driveway. I turned off the bathroom light and peeked out the window. There was a car parked at the end of my driveway with its headlights off. I couldn't see who was inside, but I had a terrible feeling I knew exactly who it was. I grabbed my phone and crept to the front window. The car was still there, just sitting in the darkness, waiting. That's when I realized that Sarah hadn't left town after all. And whatever she was planning, it was just beginning. I stood at my front window for what felt like hours, watching that dark car in my driveway. My heart was beating so fast, I thought it might jump right out of my chest. Every few minutes, I would see the glow of a cigarette lighter inside the car, confirming that someone was definitely in there. Around midnight, the car finally started up and drove away, but I didn't feel relieved. If anything, I felt more scared than before. Sarah and Rick knew where I lived, and they were angry about what had happened at the wedding. I barely slept that night. Every little sound made me jump. The house settling, the wind in the trees, even my old cat, Mr. Whiskers, walking across the wooden floor. By morning, I was exhausted and jumpy. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at my kitchen table trying to figure out what to do. Should I call the police? What would I tell them? That someone had parked in my driveway? That wasn't exactly a crime. Around 9 o'clock, my phone rang. I nearly dropped my coffee cup when I saw Michael's name on the caller ID. "Mom, are you okay?" he said as soon as I answered. "You sound tired." "I'm fine, sweetheart," I said, not wanting to worry him. "Just didn't sleep very well. How are you holding up?" "Better, actually. I called in sick to work today, and I've been cleaning Sarah's stuff out of my apartment. It's amazing how much junk she accumulated in such a short time." "That's probably good for you," I said. "Sometimes cleaning house helps us move forward." "Yeah, but Mom, I found something weird while I was packing her things." My stomach tightened. "What kind of weird?" "She had a whole box of documents hidden in the back of my closet. Bank statements, legal papers, stuff like that. But they weren't in her name, or even the fake name she was using. They were in the name of someone called Rachel Martinez." I felt cold all over. "Michael, what kind of legal papers?" That's the strange part. There were divorce papers from someone named James Martinez, dated just 6 months ago. And there was also a life insurance policy, a big one. How big? $500,000, Mom. And according to these papers, this James Martinez died in a car accident 3 weeks after their divorce was finalized. I had to sit down. This was much worse than I had thought. Sarah wasn't just a woman who married men for their money and then disappeared. She was something much more dangerous. "Michael," I said carefully, "I think you need to take those papers to the police." That's what I was thinking too. But Mom, there's something else. I found a notebook with a bunch of names and addresses written in it. Your name is in there, so is mine. But there are other names too, with notes next to them. What kind of notes? Things like widow, owns house outright, and no close family, lonely. Mom, I think Sarah and this Rick guy have been targeting lonely people for a long time. My hands started shaking. I thought about how Sarah had seemed so interested in my life when we first met. How she had asked so many questions about my finances, my house, my family. I had thought she was just being friendly, but she had been gathering information. "Michael, I need to tell you something," I said. "Last night, after I got home from the wedding, there was a car parked in my driveway. Someone was watching my house." "What? Mom, why didn't you call me? Why didn't you call the police?" "I didn't know what to tell them. But after what you just told me, I'm starting to think—" I was interrupted by a loud knock at my front door. Not a normal knock, but an aggressive pounding that made my whole house shake. "Mom, what was that noise?" Someone's at my door, I whispered, getting up and looking through the peephole. It was Sarah. But she looked completely different from the beautiful bride she had been yesterday. Her hair was messy, her makeup was smeared, and she was wearing jeans and a torn t-shirt. She looked like she hadn't slept either, but not in the same way I hadn't slept. She looked wild, desperate. "Mom, don't answer it," Michael said. "I'm calling the police right now, and then I'm coming over there." But before I could respond, Sarah started yelling through the door. "I know you're in there, Margaret. We need to talk." I stayed quiet, hoping she would go away, but the pounding got louder. "You ruined everything," Sarah screamed. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you know what's going to happen now?" Despite my fear, I found myself getting angry. This woman had tried to steal my son's life and his money, and now she was standing on my porch yelling at me like I was the one who had done something wrong. I walked over to the door but didn't open it. "Sarah, you need to leave, right now." "I'm not going anywhere until we settle this," she said, but her voice was different now. Calmer, but somehow more frightening. "You cost me a lot of money yesterday, Margaret. Money I was counting on." "I didn't cost you anything," I said through the door. "You tried to steal from my family and you got caught. That's not my fault." Sarah laughed, but it wasn't a normal laugh. It was the kind of laugh you hear in scary movies. "You think this is about the wedding money? You think $15,000 was the big score?" I felt my stomach drop. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about your house, Margaret, your bank accounts, your life insurance policy. I'm talking about the long game." My legs went weak and I had to lean against the door to keep from falling down. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that marrying Michael was just step 1. Step 2 was becoming your beloved daughter-in-law. Step 3 was taking care of you when you got sick. And step 4... She paused, and I could hear her breathing heavily through the door. "Well, let's just say that grieving families don't ask too many questions when an old lady dies peacefully in her sleep." I couldn't breathe. This woman had been planning to kill me. She had been planning to marry my son, earn my trust, and then murder me for my money. "You're insane," I whispered. "Maybe I am," Sarah said, and I could hear the grin in her voice. "But I'm also very good at what I do. Ask James Martinez." "Oh, wait, you can't. He's dead." That's when I heard the sound of sirens in the distance. Michael had called the police and they were on their way. Sarah must have heard them too because suddenly she was pounding on the door again. "This isn't over, Margaret. You can't hide from me forever." I heard her footsteps running across my porch and down the front steps. A few seconds later, I heard a car door slam and an engine start. By the time the police arrived, Sarah was gone. 2 officers came to my door, a young man and an older woman. I let them in and told them everything. About the wedding, about Sarah's lies, about the threats she had just made. "Ma'am," the older officer said, "we're going to need you to come down to the station and file a formal report. And we're going to need to see those documents your son found." Just then, Michael arrived. He looked pale and scared, and he was carrying a cardboard box. "Mom, are you okay? Did she hurt you?" "I'm fine," I said, hugging him tight. "But Michael, she told me things, terrible things about what she was planning to do." I told him and the officers about Sarah's confession, about how she had planned to marry him just so she could get close to me and eventually kill me for my inheritance. The male officer was writing everything down in a notebook. "Mrs. Williams, have you had any contact with Sarah or her associate Rick Morrison since yesterday?" "Just the car in my driveway last night and this visit today." "We're going to want to put a patrol car outside your house for the next few days," the female officer said. "And we strongly recommend that you don't stay here alone until we can locate and arrest both suspects." Michael immediately spoke up. "Mom, you're coming to stay with me. I won't take no for an answer. But what about Mr. Whiskers? I asked, looking at my old cat who was hiding under the kitchen table. He's coming too, Michael said firmly. While I packed a bag, the officers went through the box of documents that Michael had found. I could hear them talking in low voices in the living room, and from the tone of their conversation, I could tell that what they were finding was very serious. Mrs. Williams, the female officer called out, can you come here for a minute? I walked into the living room where they had spread out papers all over my coffee table. We've been looking through these documents, and we think Sarah and Rick have been running this scam for years. We found evidence of at least 5 other victims, all elderly people with significant assets. She handed me a photograph that had been in the box. It showed Sarah and Rick with an older man I didn't recognize. Do you know who this is, Gus? She asked. I studied the photo. The man looked happy, with his arms around Sarah like she was his daughter. No, I've never seen him before. This is James Martinez. He died 6 months ago in what was ruled a car accident, but now we're starting to wonder if it really was an accident. I felt sick to my stomach. You think they killed him? We think it's possible. And based on what Sarah said to you today, we think you were supposed to be their next victim. The officers spent the next 2 hours going through everything in the box and taking my statement. They also set up a security system that would alert them if anyone approached my house. Mrs. Williams, the older officer said as they were getting ready to leave, I have to ask you something. How did you know to investigate Sarah's background? What made you suspicious? I thought about how to answer that. I guess it was just instinct, I said finally. Something about the way she started pushing me out of the wedding planning didn't feel right. And when I found out she had lied about me to the wedding venue, I knew I had to dig deeper. Well, your instincts may have saved your life, she said, and probably saved your son from becoming an accessory to murder, whether he knew it or not. After the police left, Michael helped me load Mr. Whiskers into his carrier and put my suitcase in his car. As we were driving to his apartment, I couldn't stop thinking about how close I had come to disaster. Mom, Michael said as we sat at a red light, I need to apologize to you. For what? For not listening when you tried to warn me about Sarah, for letting her turn me against you, for almost letting her destroy our family. I reached over and patted his hand. Honey, you don't need to apologize for falling in love. Sarah was very good at manipulation. She fooled a lot of people. But you saw through her. Eventually. And only because I love you so much that I couldn't stand by and watch her hurt you. We spent the rest of the drive in comfortable silence. I was exhausted from everything that had happened, but I also felt relieved. Sarah's plan had been stopped, and my son was safe. Michael's apartment was small but cozy. He set up the guest bedroom for me and put Mr. Whiskers' food and litter box in the bathroom. It felt strange to be away from my own house, but I knew it was the safest thing to do. That evening we ordered pizza and sat on his couch watching old movies. It felt like when Michael was young and would have sleepovers at my house, except now I was the one sleeping over at his place. Mom, he said during a commercial break, what's going to happen now? I mean, with Sarah and Rick? The police will find them, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. They left too much evidence behind. But what if they don't? What if they really do disappear to Mexico or somewhere else? I thought about that. Sarah and Rick had been running scams for years without getting caught. They were smart, and they were experienced at disappearing when things went wrong. Then we'll be more careful, I said. We'll change our routines, be more aware of who we let into our lives, but we can't live in fear forever. But even as I said it, I knew that Sarah's threats were still echoing in my mind. This isn't over, she had said. You can't hide from me forever. What if she was right? What if she and Rick were planning some kind of revenge? What if they came back? Around 10 o'clock, Michael's phone rang. He answered it with a worried frown. This is Officer Johnson, I heard a woman's voice say. "We have some news about Sarah Connor and Rick Morrison." "What kind of news?" Michael asked, putting the phone on the speaker so I could hear. "We tracked them to a motel about 50 miles outside of town, but when we got there, they were gone. The desk clerk said they checked out early this morning, right after the story about the wedding incident aired on the local news." My heart sank. They were still out there somewhere, and they knew that the police were looking for them. "However," Officer Johnson continued, "we did find something in their motel room that you should know about." "What did you find?" I asked. "Maps. Detailed maps of your neighborhood, Mrs. Williams, with your house circled in red. And there was also a notebook with what appears to be a timeline." "A timeline of what?" "A timeline showing when you typically leave your house, when you get your mail, when you go grocery shopping. They've been watching you for weeks, maybe months." I felt like I was going to be sick. While I thought Sarah was becoming like a daughter to me, she had been studying my habits, planning the best way to get close to me so she could eventually kill me. "There's one more thing," Officer Johnson said. "We found airplane tickets. 2 tickets to Guatemala, dated for tomorrow morning." "Guatemala?" Michael asked. "It's a country with no extradition treaty with the United States," the officer explained. "If they make it there, it's going to be very hard to bring them back." After Michael hung up the phone, we sat in silence for a long time. I could tell he was trying to process everything he had learned about the woman he had almost married. "Mom," he said finally, "I keep thinking about all the times Sarah was in your house, all the times she was alone with you. She could have—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "But she didn't," I said firmly. "And she's not going to, because we stopped her in time." But privately, I was thinking the same thing. Sarah had been in my house dozens of times over the past year. She had helped me in the kitchen, used my bathroom, even stayed overnight a few times when Michael was out of town. She could have poisoned my food, tampered with my medications, or staged an accident any number of times. The only thing that had saved me was her greed. She had wanted the big payoff from the wedding money first, and that had given me time to figure out what she was really up to. "Michael," I said, "I want you to promise me something." "What?" "Promise me that if anything happens to me, if I get sick suddenly, or have an accident, or die unexpectedly, you'll make sure the police investigate thoroughly." "Mom, don't talk like that. Nothing is going to happen to you." "Promise me," I insisted. "Sarah and Rick are still out there, and they're angry. I need to know that if they find a way to hurt me, someone will ask questions." Michael was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. "I promise." "But Mom, I'm not going to let them hurt you. I'm going to protect you." "I know you are, sweetheart. You already have." We went to bed around midnight, but I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the apartment made me jump. The neighbor's TV upstairs, footsteps in the hallway, even the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Around 3 in the morning, I heard something that made my blood freeze. It was the sound of a key turning in a lock. I sat up in bed, listening carefully. Had I imagined it? Was it just the neighbors coming home late? Then I heard voices, quiet voices, whispering in the living room. "Are you sure this is the right apartment?" a woman's voice asked. "Unit 4B, just like the mailbox said," a man replied. It was Sarah and Rick. They had found us. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it. The voices in the living room were getting clearer now, and I could definitely make out Sarah's voice whispering to Rick. "Check the bedroom," she said quietly. "Make sure they're both asleep." My heart was pounding so loud I was sure they would hear it. I quickly texted 911. "Intruders in apartment. Send help. 1247 Oak Street. Unit 4B. Then I crept to Michael's bedroom door and knocked as softly as I could. "Michael," I whispered. "Michael, wake up." I heard him stirring in his bed. "Mom, what's wrong?" "They're here," I whispered through the door. "Sarah and Rick are in your apartment." Suddenly, the apartment went completely silent. No more whispering, no more footsteps. They had heard us talking. "Well, well," Sarah's voice called out, no longer trying to be quiet. "Look who's awake! Come on out, Margaret. Let's finish our conversation from earlier." Michael's bedroom door opened, and he appeared with a baseball bat in his hands. "Stay behind me, Mom," he whispered. We crept toward the living room, and I could see two dark figures standing near the front door. Sarah was holding something in her hand, but I couldn't tell what it was in the dim light. "Hello, Michael," Sarah said in that fake sweet voice she used to use. "I'm sorry we had to drop by so late, but Margaret and I have some unfinished business." "Get out of my apartment," Michael said, raising the baseball bat. "Right now." Rick laughed. "Or what? You're going to hit us with that bat?" "I don't think so, kid." That's when I saw what Sarah was holding. It was a syringe, and she was pointing it at us like a weapon. "Do you know what this is, Margaret?" she asked, taking a step closer. "It's insulin. A lot of insulin. Enough to put a person into a coma that looks exactly like a diabetic emergency." "I'm not diabetic," I said, backing away. "That doesn't matter," Sarah replied with a cold smile. "By the time anyone figures that out, it'll be too late. And poor Michael will be so grief-stricken over losing his mother right after his wedding disaster that no one will question his story about finding you collapsed in your sleep." "You're insane," Michael said, stepping protectively in front of me. "No, I'm practical," Sarah said. "Margaret cost me a lot of money yesterday, money I needed to pay some very dangerous people. Now I have to find another way to settle my debts." Rick spoke up from behind her. "Sarah, we need to make this quick. Those plane tickets aren't going to hold forever." "You're right," Sarah said, and suddenly she lunged forward with the syringe. Michael swung the baseball bat, but Rick grabbed it before it could connect. The two men started struggling, crashing into Michael's coffee table and knocking over a lamp. Sarah was coming straight at me with the syringe raised. I ran toward the kitchen looking for something to defend myself with. I grabbed a large knife from the counter just as Sarah caught up to me. "Give me that!" she screamed, grabbing for the knife. We struggled over it, and I could hear Michael and Rick fighting in the living room. Furniture was crashing, glass was breaking, and someone was shouting. Sarah was younger and stronger than me, but I was fighting for my life. I managed to elbow her in the stomach, and she doubled over, dropping the syringe. It shattered on the kitchen floor. "You stupid old woman!" Sarah gasped, straightening up. "Do you have any idea who you're messing with?" "I know exactly who I'm messing with," I said, still holding the knife between us. "You're a murderer and a thief, and you picked the wrong family to mess with." That's when I heard the most beautiful sound in the world, police sirens, getting closer and closer. Sarah heard them too, and her face went white. "Rick!" she called out. "We need to go, now!" But Rick was still fighting with Michael. And from the sound of it, Michael was winning. There was a loud crash, and then Rick cried out in pain. "Rick!" Sarah screamed, running toward the living room. I followed her, still holding the knife, and saw Rick lying on the floor holding his arm. Michael was standing over him with the baseball bat, breathing heavily. "The police are coming," Michael said to Sarah. "It's over." But Sarah wasn't giving up. She ran to her purse, which was sitting on Michael's couch, and pulled out a gun. "Nobody move!" she yelled, pointing it at Michael. "Rick, get up! We're leaving!" Rick struggled to his feet, still holding his injured arm. "Sarah, let's just go. Forget about them." "No!" Sarah screamed. "She ruined everything. She cost us millions of dollars. James Martinez was just the beginning. We had it all planned out." The sirens were getting louder. They were probably just a few blocks away now. "Sarah," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "you can still walk away from this. Don't make it worse by shooting someone." "Worse?" Sarah laughed that crazy laugh again. "It can't get any worse. Do you know what happens to people who don't pay back the money they owe to the kind of people we borrowed from? She was waving the gun around wildly now, and I was terrified it was going to go off accidentally. What kind of people? Michael asked. The kind of people who break your legs first and ask questions later, Rick answered grimly. Sarah, we need to leave right now. That's when the apartment door burst open and 3 police officers rushed in with their guns drawn. Drop your weapon, the first officer shouted at Sarah. Drop it now! For a second, Sarah looked like she might actually shoot someone. Her eyes were wild, and her hand was shaking as she pointed the gun back and forth between the police officers and us. Sarah, I said quietly, it's over. Don't make this any worse. She looked at me with pure hatred in her eyes. This is all your fault, she said. If you had just minded your own business, none of this would have happened. If I had minded my own business, I replied, I'd probably be dead by now. Sarah's face crumpled and she started crying, but even then she didn't lower the gun. Ma'am, the police officer said firmly, I'm going to count to 3. If you don't drop that weapon, we will be forced to shoot. 1. Sarah, please, Rick said from where he was slumped against the wall. Just put the gun down. 2. Sarah looked around the room like a trapped animal. She could see there was no way out, but she wasn't ready to give up. 3. Just as the officer was about to pull the trigger, Sarah threw the gun across the room and collapsed on the floor, sobbing. I'm sorry, she cried. I'm sorry. I didn't want to hurt anyone. But I knew that wasn't true. Sarah had been planning to hurt people all along. She had probably killed James Martinez, and who knows how many other victims. The only thing she was sorry about was getting caught. The police officers quickly handcuffed both Sarah and Rick. Paramedics arrived to check Rick's injured arm and to make sure Michael and I were okay. Are you hurt, Mrs. Williams? One of the paramedics asked. I'm fine, I said, but I was shaking all over. Just scared. Michael sat down next to me on his couch, which was now covered in broken glass from the lamp Sarah and Rick had knocked over during their struggle. Mom, he said, putting his arm around me, are you really okay? I think so, I said. But Michael, I keep thinking about what would have happened if the police hadn't gotten here in time. Don't think about that, he said firmly. They did get here in time and we're both safe. Detective Rodriguez, who had taken over the case from the patrol officers, came over to talk to us. Mrs. Williams, can you tell me exactly what happened here tonight? I told her about waking up to the sound of voices, about Sarah's threats, and the syringe full of insulin, about our fight in the kitchen. She said she was going to make it look like I died of a diabetic coma, I explained, even though I'm not diabetic. That's actually a very sophisticated method, Detective Rodriguez said. It suggests they've done this before. What's going to happen to them now? Michael asked. They're being charged with breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon, and attempted murder, the detective explained. And we're also reopening the investigation into James Martinez's death. Do you think they really killed him? I asked. Based on what we've found so far, it's looking very likely. We found life insurance paperwork in their motel room, and the timing of his death was very suspicious. As the police were finishing up their investigation of the scene, Detective Rodriguez pulled me aside. Mrs. Williams, I have to tell you something. When we searched Sarah and Rick's car, we found some items that belonged to you. What kind of items? Personal things? Family photos, documents from your house, even some of your jewelry. It looks like Sarah had been taking things every time she visited you. I felt sick to my stomach. She was stealing from me this whole time? It appears so. We think she was building up a collection of your personal belongings to help establish herself as a grieving daughter-in-law after you died. The detective handed me a plastic bag filled with things I recognized from my house. My mother's pearl necklace, some family photographs, even my address book. She was really planning to kill me. I said quietly. It wasn't a question anymore, it was just the terrible truth. Mrs. Williams, I know this is hard to hear, but Sarah Connor is a very dangerous person. We've now connected her to at least 3 suspicious deaths over the past 5 years. You and your son are very lucky to be alive. After the police left, Michael and I sat in his damaged living room, trying to process everything that had happened. It was almost dawn, and neither of us had slept all night. "Mom," Michael said, "I keep thinking about how different things could have been. If you hadn't figured out what Sarah was up to, if you hadn't stopped the wedding." "Don't think about what could have happened," I said. "Think about what did happen. We survived. We protected each other. And Sarah and Rick are going to prison for a very long time." "But what if there are other people out there like them? What if this isn't really over?" I looked at my son, this brave young man who had fought to protect me with a baseball bat against armed criminals, and I felt proud and scared at the same time. "Then we'll be ready for them," I said. "Because now we know what to look for. We know how these kinds of people operate." "How did you know, Mom? I mean, how did you really know that something was wrong with Sarah?" I thought about that question for a long time. "I think it was because she tried too hard," I said finally. "Real love doesn't need to prove itself constantly. Real love is comfortable and natural. But Sarah was always performing, always trying to convince me how much she cared about me. And the way she started pushing you out of the wedding planning? That was the biggest red flag. When someone really loves your child, they want to include the people who are important to that child. They don't try to isolate them from their family." Michael nodded. "I'm going to remember that for next time." "Next time?" I asked with a small smile. "Well, not anytime soon," he said quickly, I think I need to take a break from dating for a while." "That's probably a good idea," I agreed. "But Michael, don't let this experience make you afraid to love again. There are good people out there, real people, who will love you for who you are, not for what you can give them." "How will I know the difference?" "You'll know," I said, "because when you meet the right person, they'll want to be part of your whole life, including your annoying old mother." For the first time in days, Michael laughed. "You're not annoying, Mom. You're the best mother in the world. You saved my life." "And you saved mine right back," I said, hugging him tight. We spent the rest of the morning cleaning up Michael's apartment and boarding up the broken window. The landlord came by and was surprisingly understanding about the damage, especially after Michael explained what had happened. Around noon, Detective Rodriguez called with an update. "Mrs. Williams, I thought you'd want to know that Sarah Connor and Rick Morrison have been officially charged with attempted murder. They're being held without bail." "What about the other cases? James Martinez and the other people they might have killed?" "We're working on that. The FBI is getting involved because they crossed state lines. And we're coordinating with police departments in several other states." "So this is really over?" I asked. "This part is over," Detective Rodriguez said. "But Mrs. Williams, I want you to be careful for the next few months. Sarah and Rick were part of a larger network of con artists, and some of their associates might still be out there." After she hung up, I told Michael what the detective had said. "A larger network?" he asked, looking worried again. "Michael, we can't live our lives in fear," I said. "We have to trust that the police will do their job. And we have to be smart about protecting ourselves." "What do you mean?" "I mean we pay attention to the people we let into our lives. We ask questions when things don't add up. We trust our instincts when something feels wrong." "And we stick together," Michael added. "And we stick together," I agreed. That afternoon we went back to my house to pick up some more of my things. The police had removed the security tape from the front door, but I still felt nervous walking inside. Everything looked normal, but somehow the house felt different. It didn't feel as safe as it used to. Every room reminded me of Sarah. The kitchen where we had made cookies together. The living room where she had sat and listened to my stories. the guest bedroom where she had sometimes stayed overnight. "It's going to take some time to feel comfortable here again," Michael said, watching me look around. "I know," I said, "but this is my home. I'm not going to let Sarah take that away from me, too." While I was packing more clothes, Michael went through the house checking for anything else that Sarah might have taken. He found several items missing: a silver picture frame, some cash from my emergency fund, even some of my prescription bottles. "She was really planning something elaborate," he said grimly. As we were getting ready to leave, my neighbor Mrs. Chen came over from next door. "Margaret, I heard what happened," she said, giving me a hug. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea that girl was dangerous." "None of us did," I said. "She was very good at pretending to be something she wasn't." "You know," Mrs. Chen said thoughtfully, "I always thought there was something odd about her boyfriend." "Her boyfriend?" Michael asked. "That older man who used to pick her up sometimes. He never came to the door, just sat in his car honking the horn. It seemed rude." "How long has he been coming around?" I asked. "Oh, months and months. Long before she got engaged to your son. I remember thinking it was strange that she never introduced him to the family." Michael and I looked at each other. Sarah and Rick had been planning this for much longer than we had realized. They had been watching our family, studying our routines, planning their attack for the better part of a year. "Mrs. Chen," I said, "if you ever see anything suspicious around here, or if anyone comes asking questions about me, please call the police immediately." "Of course, dear, and Margaret, you're very brave, and what you did at that wedding took real courage." As we drove back to Michael's apartment, I thought about what Mrs. Chen had said. Was I brave? I didn't feel brave. I felt scared and tired and sad about everything that had happened. But maybe bravery isn't about not being scared. Maybe it's about doing what needs to be done even when you are scared. "Mom," Michael said as we stopped at a red light, "I've been thinking about something." "What's that?" "I want to do something to help other people avoid what happened to us. Maybe we could start a support group for victims of romance scams, or work with the police to educate people about the warning signs." I looked at my son with pride. Even after everything he had been through, his first instinct was to help others. "I think that's a wonderful idea," I said. "But first, let's focus on healing ourselves. We've been through a lot of trauma, and we need time to process it all." "You're right," he said. "But Mom, I don't want Sarah and Rick to win, even if they're in prison. I don't want them to make us afraid to trust people or to love again." "They won't," I said firmly, "because we're stronger than they are. We have something they don't have." "What's that?" "Each other. Real love. The kind of love that protects instead of destroys." As we pulled into the parking lot of Michael's apartment building, I saw something that made me smile for the first time in days. There was a small crowd of people standing outside the building, holding flowers and balloons. As we got closer, I could see that they were Michael's friends and some of our neighbors from my street. "What's all this?" Michael asked as we got out of the car. "We heard what happened," said Tom, one of Michael's college friends. "We wanted to make sure you both knew that you have people who care about you." Mrs. Patterson from down the street came over and hugged me. "Margaret, dear, we're so proud of you for standing up to those awful people." "And we brought dinner," announced Janet from the house next to Mrs. Chen's. "Enough food for a week so you don't have to worry about cooking." As we walked into the building surrounded by friends and neighbors carrying casseroles and flowers, I realized something important. Sarah had tried to isolate us, to make us vulnerable by cutting us off from the people who cared about us, but her plan had backfired. Instead of driving people away, our experience had brought our community closer together. "You know what, Michael?" I said as we rode the elevator up to his apartment. "What's that, Mom?" "I think we're going to be just fine." But even as I said it, I couldn't shake the feeling that Detective Rodriguez's warning about Sarah and Rick's associates was something we needed to take seriously. As we reached Michael's floor and the elevator doors opened, I saw a figure standing at the far end of the hallway near the emergency exit. It was a woman I had never seen before, and when she saw us, she quickly disappeared through the exit door. Had she been waiting for us? Was she connected to Sarah and Rick? Or was I just being paranoid after everything that had happened? I decided not to mention it to Michael. We had enough to worry about already. But as we settled in for the evening with our friends and neighbors, sharing food and stories and laughter, I made a mental note to be extra vigilant in the coming days. Because if Detective Rodriguez was right and Sarah and Rick were part of a larger criminal network, then our nightmare might not be over yet. The woman in the hallway haunted my thoughts for the next 3 days. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see her face, pale, sharp-featured, with dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. She had been watching us, I was sure of it, and the way she disappeared so quickly when she saw us meant she didn't want to be seen. I finally decided I had to tell Michael about it when I caught myself checking the locks on his apartment door for the 4th time in one morning. "Mom, you're making me nervous," he said, looking up from his laptop where he was working from home. "What's wrong?" I sat down on his couch, trying to figure out how to explain without sounding paranoid. "Michael, the night we came back from my house with all our friends, I saw someone in the hallway." "What kind of someone?" "A woman I'd never seen before. She was standing near the emergency exit, and when she saw us coming out of the elevator, she ran." Michael closed his laptop and gave me his full attention. "Why didn't you tell me this earlier?" "Because I wasn't sure if it meant anything. Maybe she was just visiting someone and got scared when she saw our whole group." "Or maybe she was connected to Sarah and Rick," Michael said grimly. "That's what I'm afraid of." Michael picked up his phone. "I'm calling Detective Rodriguez." 20 minutes later, Detective Rodriguez was sitting in Michael's living room, taking notes while I described the woman I had seen. "Can you give me any more details about her appearance?" she asked. "She was probably in her 30s, average height, very thin. She was wearing all black, black jeans, black jacket, black shoes, and her hair was pulled back so tight it made her face look severe." "Did you notice anything else? Any jewelry, tattoos, anything distinctive?" I thought hard, trying to remember every detail. "She had a large black purse, more like a bag, really. It looked heavy, like it was full of something." Detective Rodriguez wrote that down. "Mrs. Williams, I'm going to be honest with you. We've discovered that Sarah Connor and Rick Morrison were indeed part of a larger criminal organization. They weren't working alone." My stomach dropped. "How many others are there?" "We're not sure yet, but we've identified at least 3 other people who were working with them. 2 men and 1 woman." "What do they look like?" Michael asked. Detective Rodriguez pulled out her phone and showed us some photos. "These are the people we've identified so far." The 3rd photo made my blood run cold. It was the woman from the hallway. "That's her," I said, pointing at the screen. "That's the woman I saw." "Her name is Angela Torres," Detective Rodriguez said. "She's Sarah's cousin, and according to our investigation, she's been helping Sarah and Rick identify potential victims for the past 3 years." "What does that mean for us?" Michael asked. "It means you're both still in danger. Angela Torres has a very different skill set than Sarah and Rick. While they specialized in romance scams and long-term cons, Angela is more direct." "Direct how?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "She's suspected of being involved in at least 2 murders that were made to look like accidents. A house fire in Ohio and a hit and run in Pennsylvania." I felt like I was going to be sick. "So, she's here to finish what Sarah and Rick started?" "Possibly. Or she might be here for revenge. From what we've learned about this organization, they don't like it when their operations are disrupted." Detective Rodriguez leaned forward in her chair. Mrs. Williams, Mr. Williams, I strongly recommend that you both leave town for a while. Maybe stay with relatives in another state until we can locate and arrest Angela Torres. Leave town, I said, but this is our home. Why should we have to run away? Because staying here could get you killed, Detective Rodriguez said bluntly. These people don't play games, Mrs. Williams. If Angela Torres is here to hurt you, she will find a way to do it. Michael stood up and started pacing around the room. What about police protection? Can't you assign officers to watch us? We don't have the resources for round-the-clock protection, especially when we don't know how long this threat might last. Angela Torres could disappear for months and then come back when we least expect it. I thought about my house, my garden, my cat, my whole life in this town. Was I really supposed to abandon everything because of these criminals? What if we don't leave? I asked. What if we stay and just try to be more careful? Detective Rodriguez sighed. Then I strongly suggest you take some precautions. Don't go anywhere alone, don't follow regular routines, and don't trust anyone you don't know extremely well. After the detective left, Michael and I sat in silence for a long time. I could see him struggling with the decision, just like I was. Mom, maybe we should listen to her, he said finally. Maybe we should go visit Aunt Linda in Arizona for a few weeks. I shook my head. Michael, if we run away every time someone threatens us, we'll spend our whole lives running. At some point, we have to take a stand. But Mom, this isn't about being brave. This is about being smart. If Angela Torres is as dangerous as Detective Rodriguez says, staying here is just giving her more opportunities to hurt us. I knew he was right, but something inside me was rebelling against the idea of leaving. This was my home, my community, my life. Why should I let these criminals drive me away from everything I loved? That's when Michael's phone rang. It was his boss, calling about a work project that needed immediate attention. I have to take this, Michael said, stepping into his bedroom to talk privately. While he was on the phone, I walked over to the window and looked down at the parking lot. Everything looked normal. People coming and going, cars parked in their usual spots, children playing on the small playground near the building. But then I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. There was a black sedan parked across the street that hadn't been there earlier, and sitting in the driver's seat was a woman with dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. Angela Torres had found us. I quickly stepped back from the window, but not before I saw her looking up at Michael's apartment with a pair of binoculars. Michael, I called out, trying to keep my voice calm. Michael, you need to come here right now. He finished his phone call and came back into the living room. What's wrong, Mom? She's here, I whispered, pointing toward the window. Angela Torres is sitting in a car across the street watching this building. Michael carefully moved the curtain aside and looked down. I don't see anyone. I looked again and the black sedan was gone. She was there, Michael. I saw her with binoculars. Maybe she saw you looking and drove away, he said. We need to call Detective Rodriguez right now. But before Michael could reach for his phone, we heard footsteps in the hallway outside his apartment. Heavy, deliberate footsteps that stopped right outside his door. We both froze, staring at the door. The footsteps had stopped, but we could sense someone standing there. Then we heard a sound that made my blood turn to ice. Someone was trying to pick the lock. Michael grabbed his baseball bat from the closet and motioned for me to get behind the kitchen counter. He pulled out his phone and quickly dialed 911. This is Michael Williams at 1247 Oak Street, Unit 4B, he whispered into the phone. Someone is trying to break into my apartment. We need help immediately. The lock-picking sound stopped, and we heard footsteps moving away from the door. For a moment, I thought maybe the person had given up and left. Then we heard a window breaking in the bedroom. She's coming through the bedroom window, Michael said, gripping his bat tighter. I looked around the kitchen for something to defend myself with and grabbed the largest knife from the block on the counter. Mom, we need to get out of here, Michael said. The police aren't going to get here in time. But as we moved toward the front door, we heard footsteps coming from the bedroom. Angela Torres was already inside the apartment. "Hello, Margaret," a voice called out from the back of the apartment. It was cold and emotionless, not at all like Sarah's fake sweetness. "We need to have a little chat." Michael put his finger to his lips and motioned toward the front door. Maybe we could sneak out while she was still in the bedroom. But as we crept toward the door, Angela Torres appeared in the doorway between the living room and the hallway, blocking our escape route. She looked exactly like the woman I had seen in the hallway, except now I could see that she was carrying a gun. "Going somewhere?" she asked with a cold smile. "What do you want?" Michael asked, still holding the baseball bat. "I want to finish the job that my cousin Sarah started," Angela said. "You two cost my family a lot of money, and more importantly, you cost us our reputation." "Your reputation for what? Murdering innocent people?" I asked, surprised by my own boldness. Angela laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Innocent? Margaret, you and your son destroyed a carefully planned operation that took months to set up. Do you have any idea how much money we invested in Sarah's fake identity? How much time we spent researching your family?" "So this is about money?" Michael asked. "It's about respect," Angela replied. "In our line of work, word gets around when someone makes you look foolish. If we let you get away with what you did, other marks will think they can outsmart us too." "Marks?" I said. "Is that what you call the people you murder?" "I call them business expenses," Angela said coldly. "And unfortunately, you two have become very expensive." That's when I heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Police sirens in the distance, getting closer. Angela heard them too, and her expression changed from cold confidence to anger. "Damn it," she muttered. "This was supposed to be quick and clean." She raised the gun and pointed it at me. "Well, Margaret, it looks like we're going to have to do this the hard way." But before she could pull the trigger, Michael swung his baseball bat as hard as he could, hitting her hand and knocking the gun across the room. Angela screamed in pain and rage, lunging at Michael with her uninjured hand. They crashed into the coffee table, sending broken glass flying everywhere. I ran toward where the gun had landed, but Angela was faster than she looked, even with her injured hand. She managed to break free from Michael and dive for the weapon. She got to it first, but as she was picking it up, I did something I never thought I would do in my entire life. I stabbed her. Not deeply, just enough to make her drop the gun again. But the sight of the kitchen knife in my hand, with blood on the blade, made me feel sick to my stomach. Angela stared at me in shock, holding her wounded shoulder. "You crazy old woman," she gasped. "Do you know what you've done?" "I've protected my family, Mia," I said, still holding the knife even though my hands were shaking terribly. The police sirens were getting very close now, and Angela realized she was out of time. She struggled to her feet, still holding her shoulder. "This isn't over?" she said, backing toward the broken bedroom window. "My family doesn't forget, and we don't forgive." "Your family is going to prison," Michael said, getting up from the floor and retrieving his baseball bat. "Some of them," Angela agreed, "but not all of them. And Margaret, when you least expect it, when you think you're finally safe, one of us will find you." Then she climbed back out through the bedroom window and disappeared into the alley behind the building. 2 minutes later, the apartment was full of police officers, paramedics, and detectives. Detective Rodriguez arrived shortly after, looking both relieved that we were safe and frustrated that Angela had escaped. "She's injured," I told her. "I stabbed her in the shoulder." Detective Rodriguez looked surprised. "Mrs. Williams, you stabbed an armed intruder?" "I had to protect my son," I said simply. "Well, that injury will make her easier to track. She'll need medical attention, and hospitals have to report knife wounds to the police." But even as Detective Rodriguez was organizing the manhunt for Angela Torres, I couldn't shake the feeling that we hadn't seen the last of her. "Detective," I said, "Angela said her family doesn't forgive. Are there more of them out there?" We're still investigating the full extent of their organization, she admitted. But Mrs. Williams, what you did today was incredibly brave. You saved both your lives. I don't feel brave, I said. I feel scared and tired and angry that these people won't leave us alone. Michael came over and put his arm around me. Mom, we're going to get through this, just like we got through everything else. But as I looked around his destroyed apartment, the broken windows, the overturned furniture, the blood on the kitchen knife, I wondered if we would ever really be safe again. Detective Rodriguez, I said, I want to change my mind about leaving town. Oh? I want to help you catch these people, all of them. I want to make sure they can never hurt another family the way they hurt ours. Detective Rodriguez looked at me with surprise and something that might have been respect. Mrs. Williams, what exactly are you proposing? I'm proposing that we set a trap, I said, and I'm willing to be the bait. Michael immediately started shaking his head. Mom, absolutely not. I'm not letting you put yourself in danger again. Michael, so, honey, I'm already in danger. Angela made it clear that this won't end until we end it. So let's end it on our terms. What kind of trap are you thinking about? Detective Rodriguez asked, though she looked skeptical. Angela said her family invested a lot of money in their operation with Sarah and Rick. What if we made them think they could get that money back? How? I thought about it for a moment. What if we let it be known that I'm willing to pay them to leave us alone? That I'm scared and desperate and ready to give them everything I have? That's actually not a bad idea, Detective Rodriguez said slowly. If we could lure them into a meeting, we could catch all of them at once, I finished. Michael was still shaking his head. This is crazy. Mom, these people have already tried to kill you twice. Why would you volunteer to give them a third chance? Because, sweetheart, sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to stand up to them. And these people are the worst kind of bullies. The kind that prey on people who are grieving or lonely or vulnerable. I stood up and walked to the broken window, looking out at the alley where Angela had escaped. I've spent the last few weeks feeling like a victim, I said. But I'm not a victim. I'm a mother and a grandmother someday and a member of this community. And I'm not going to let these criminals terrorize good people anymore. Detective Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. Mrs. Williams, if we were to do something like this, it would have to be very carefully planned and very dangerous. I understand. And there would be no guarantee that we could protect you if something went wrong. I understand that too. Michael came over and stood next to me at the window. Mom, if you're really going to do this, then I'm doing it with you. No, Michael, this is my fight. No, it's our fight. We're a team, remember? We protect each other. I looked at my son, this brave young man who had already risked his life to save mine, and I felt a surge of love and pride. All right, I said, but we do this smart. We plan it carefully, and we don't take any unnecessary risks. Detective Rodriguez stood up. Let me talk to my supervisors and see if we can put together a task force for this. It's going to take coordination with multiple agencies. How long will that take, Mommy? I asked. A few days, maybe a week. Good, I said. That gives us time to plan. After the police finished processing the crime scene and securing Michael's apartment, we went to a hotel for the night. Neither of us wanted to stay in a place where Angela Torres had broken in. As we sat in the hotel room eating takeout Chinese food and trying to process everything that had happened, Michael asked me a question that I'd been asking myself. Mom, are you sure about this? About setting ourselves up as bait? No, I admitted. I'm not sure about anything anymore. But Michael, I keep thinking about all the other people out there who might be targets. Lonely widows, elderly men, young people looking for love. If we can stop this criminal organization, maybe we can save other families from going through what we've been through. And if we can't stop them? I thought about that. Then at least we'll go down fighting instead of running scared. Michael smiled for the first time all day. You know what, Mom? I think Dad would be proud of you. Your father would probably tell me I'm crazy and try to talk me out of it, I said with a laugh. Yeah, but he'd also know better than to argue with you once you'd made up your mind. That night, I lay in the hotel bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had led us to this point. 6 months ago, my biggest worry was whether my roses would bloom on time. Now I was planning to help the police catch a ring of murderers. Life had a funny way of changing when you least expected it. But as scared as I was about what lay ahead, I was also determined. Sarah, Rick, and Angela had underestimated me from the beginning. They thought I was just a lonely old woman who could be easily manipulated and disposed of. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The plan took shape over the next week like pieces of a complicated puzzle. Detective Rodriguez introduced us to FBI agent Sarah Chen. Yes, another Sarah, which felt like some kind of cosmic joke, who would be leading the Joint Task Force operation. Mrs. Williams, Agent Chen said during our first meeting at the FBI field office, I want to be very clear about what we're asking you to do. This is extremely dangerous, and there are no guarantees that we can keep you safe. I understand, I said, though my hands were shaking as I signed the paperwork that would make me an official FBI informant. But Agent Chen, these people killed at least 3 innocent people that we know of. If I can help stop them from killing more, then the risk is worth it. The plan itself was relatively simple, which Agent Chen said was usually the best kind. We would leak information through carefully chosen channels that I was desperate to make a deal with Angela's criminal organization. I would offer them a large sum of money, my entire life savings, plus the equity in my house, in exchange for leaving my family alone forever. The beauty of this approach, Agent Chen explained, is that it plays to their greed and their ego. They'll think they've found a way to get paid without having to kill anyone, which reduces their risk. And they'll think they've scared you into submission, which feeds their sense of power. But won't they suspect it's a trap? Michael asked. Possibly, Agent Chen admitted. That's why we have to make your mother's fear seem completely genuine. We're going to stage some incidents that will make it look like Angela is escalating her campaign against you. Over the next few days, I became an actress in the strangest play of my life. FBI agents, posing as criminals, left threatening notes in my mailbox, made scary phone calls to Michael's apartment, and even staged a break-in at my house, though they were careful not to actually damage anything important. To anyone watching, and we were sure Angela or her associates were watching, it would look like I was being systematically terrorized. The hardest part was the emotional toll it took on Michael. Even though he knew the incidents were fake, seeing me appear to be under constant threat was wearing him down. Mom, he said one evening as we sat in our hotel room going over the plan for the 100th time, are you absolutely sure about this? We could still change our minds and just leave town. Michael, do you remember what you said about wanting to help other people avoid what happened to us? Yes, but this is how we help them. By stopping these criminals before they can hurt anyone else. But what if something goes wrong? What if they don't believe the setup? Or what if they decide to just kill you instead of taking the money? I reached over and took his hand. Then you make sure the world knows what they did. You make sure their story gets told, and you help the police catch them anyway. Mom, don't talk like that. Honey, I'm 72 years old. I've lived a good life, raised wonderful children, and been blessed with love and happiness. If something happens to me while trying to protect other people, that's not a bad way to go. Nothing is going to happen to you, Michael said firmly. I won't let it. I know you won't, sweetheart. That's why I'm not afraid. The meeting was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon at Riverside Park, a large public space where the FBI could position agents without looking suspicious. I would sit alone at a picnic table near the pond, pretending to wait nervously with a briefcase full of money. Actually fake bills with real ones on top and bottom. "Remember," Agent Chen told me the night before, "you're playing a scared, desperate woman who just wants this nightmare to end. You don't need to act brave or defiant. In fact, the more frightened you seem, the more likely they are to believe this is genuine. What if Angela doesn't come herself? What if she sends someone else? Then we adjust the plan accordingly. But Mrs. Williams, we have reason to believe that Angela Torres has made this personal. She wants to confront you face to face." "What kind of reason?" Agent Chen showed me a printout of a text message. "We've been monitoring communications between known associates of their organization. Angela sent this yesterday." The message read, "The old woman made me bleed. I want to look her in the eyes when she begs for mercy." I shuddered when I read it, but I also felt a surge of determination. Angela Torres thought she was dealing with a helpless victim. She was about to learn otherwise. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, which somehow felt appropriate for what we were about to do. Michael and I had breakfast at the hotel, though neither of us ate very much. "I'll be watching from the parking area," he said for probably the 10th time. "If anything goes wrong, I'm coming to help you." "Michael, if anything goes wrong, you follow Agent Chen's instructions. Do not try to be a hero." "Too late for that, Mom. I learned from the best." At exactly 2 p.m., I walked into Riverside Park carrying a black briefcase and wearing a wire so small I couldn't even feel it. There were FBI agents positioned around the park, some pretending to jog, others walking dogs, one reading a newspaper on a bench about 50 yards from my table. I sat down at the designated picnic table and tried to look like a frightened old woman who was in over her head. It wasn't hard to act nervous. My heart was beating so fast I was sure everyone in the park could hear it. At 2:15, Angela Torres appeared on the walking path that led to the pond. She was wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap, but I recognized her immediately. She looked around carefully before approaching my table, obviously checking for any signs of a trap. "Margaret," she said, sitting down across from me, "you look terrible." "I haven't been sleeping well," I said, which was completely true. "I just want this to end, Angela. I want you and your family to leave us alone." "That's going to be expensive," she said, with a cold smile. I pushed the briefcase across the table. "There's $50,000 in there. It's everything I have in savings. Plus, I took out a loan against my house." Angela opened the briefcase and looked at the money. Her eyes lit up with greed, exactly as Agent Chen had predicted. $50,000 is a good start," she said, closing the case. "But it's not enough to cover what you cost us." "What do you mean, not enough? We agreed on $50,000. "That was before I had to get stitches in my shoulder because you stabbed me," Angela said, her voice getting harder. "Now the price has gone up." "To how much?" $100,000. And I want it by next Friday or Michael dies." This wasn't part of the plan. Angela was supposed to take the money and leave, allowing the FBI agents to follow her back to wherever she and her associates were hiding. "I don't have another $50,000, I said, letting real panic creep into my voice. "I've given you everything." "Then you better figure out how to get more," Angela said, standing up, "because if you don't, I'm going to kill your son slowly and make you watch." She picked up the briefcase and started to walk away, but then she stopped and turned back. "Oh, and Margaret? If you even think about going to the police, I'll know. We have people everywhere, including inside the police department. Try to cross us again, and you'll both be dead by morning." Then she walked away, disappearing into the crowd of park visitors. I sat at the picnic table for another 5 minutes, as instructed, then got up and walked to the designated meeting spot where Agent Chen was waiting in an unmarked van. "Did you get all that?" I asked as I climbed into the van. "We got it," Agent Chen said grimly. "But Mrs. Williams, we have a problem." What kind of problem? Angela Torres is not working alone today. We spotted at least 3 other people in the park who were watching the meeting. This is bigger than we thought. Michael appeared at the van door looking worried. Mom, are you okay? What happened? I told him about Angela's demand for more money and her threats. This is getting out of hand, he said. Mom, I think we need to call this off. Actually, Agent Chen said, this might work out better than we planned. Mrs. Williams, would you be willing to set up another meeting? Of course. But what's different about the plan now? Now we know they have multiple people involved, and we know they're confident enough to make bigger demands. If we can get them all in one place for the next meeting, we can arrest the entire local cell of their organization. What do you need me to do? We need you to call the number Angela gave you and tell her you found a way to get the additional $50,000. Set up another meeting for next Friday, but this time, insist on a more private location. More private? Isn't that more dangerous? Yes, but it's also more likely to draw out all their people. They'll want to make sure they can handle the transaction without interference. That evening, back at the hotel, I made the phone call that would set up what I hoped would be the final confrontation with Angela Torres and her criminal family. Angela, it's Margaret, I said when she answered. I found a way to get your money. How? I'm selling my house. The realtor says I can get at least $150,000 for it, minus what I owe on the loan. I'll have your $100,000 by Friday. Good, Angela said. Meet me at the old Morrison warehouse on Industrial Drive at 8 p.m. Come alone and bring the money. What if I can't sell the house by Friday? Then you and your son die. It's that simple. She hung up, leaving me staring at the phone in my shaking hands. Mom, Michael said. Are you okay? I'm fine, I said. But Michael, I think this is going to be our last chance to end this. Agent Chen arrived an hour later to go over the plan for Friday night. The warehouse location was both good and bad news. Good because it was isolated, and the FBI could control the area. Bad because it gave Angela's people more opportunities to escape if things went wrong. Mrs. Williams, I want you to know that this meeting is going to be much more dangerous than the one in the park, Agent Chen said. Are you sure you want to go through with it? I'm sure, I said without hesitation. What if Angela decides she doesn't want to let you leave? Even after you give her the money? Then you'll arrest her for attempted murder instead of just extortion. Agent Chen smiled. Mrs. Williams, you're either the bravest person I've ever met or the craziest. Maybe both, I admitted. The next few days passed slowly. We moved to a different hotel as a precaution, and I spent my time reading, knitting, and trying not to think too much about what might go wrong on Friday night. Michael was more nervous than I was, which was both touching and frustrating. He kept suggesting alternative plans, ways to catch Angela's people without putting me in direct danger. Mom, what if we just let the FBI handle this without you? They know who Angela is now, and they have a description of her associates. Michael, these people have been running cons and committing murders for years without getting caught. The only reason we have any chance of stopping them is because they want to confront me personally. Because Angela is angry that you stabbed her? Because she's angry, and because she's greedy, and because she thinks I'm just a helpless old woman who got lucky once but won't get lucky again. What if she's right? I looked at my son, this man who had fought armed criminals with a baseball bat to protect me, and I felt overwhelmed with love and pride. Michael, do you remember when you were 7 years old and you got in trouble at school for fighting? Yeah, I hit Tommy Morrison because he was picking on that kid with the thick glasses. And do you remember what I told you about when it's okay to fight? Michael nodded slowly. You said it's okay to fight when you're protecting someone who can't protect themselves. That's right. And that's what we're doing now. We're fighting to protect all the people who don't know they're being targeted by these criminals. Friday night arrived faster than I wanted it to and slower than I could stand. Agent Chen picked me up at 6 p.m. to go over the final details of the operation. We'll have agents positioned around the warehouse, but Mrs. Williams, once you go inside, you'll be mostly on your own until we can move in safely. How will you know when to move in? We'll be monitoring through the wire you're wearing. If Angela threatens you, or if the situation becomes dangerous, we'll come in immediately. What if she has a signal jammer or something that blocks the wire? Agent Chen looked uncomfortable. Then we'll have to rely on visual surveillance and hope we can see enough through the warehouse windows to know when you need help. At 7:45 p.m., I walked up to the Morrison warehouse carrying another briefcase full of fake money. The building was old and run down, with broken windows and graffiti on the walls. It looked like the perfect place for a criminal meeting. Angela was waiting inside, just as I had expected. But what I hadn't expected was that she wasn't alone. There were 4 other people with her, 3 men and another woman, and they all looked like they meant business. "Hello, Margaret," Angela said with that same cold smile. "I see you managed to find the money." "I did what you asked," I said, setting the briefcase on a dusty table in the center of the warehouse. "Now I want your promise that you'll leave my family alone." Angela laughed. "Oh, Margaret, you're still not understanding how this works, are you?" "What do you mean?" "I mean that this isn't just about money anymore. This is about respect. You made my family look weak, and in our business, that's worse than losing money." One of the men stepped forward. He was tall and muscular, with tattoos covering his arms. "Angela's been telling us all about you," he said in a gravelly voice. "How you think you're so smart. How you embarrassed our people." "I just protected my son," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And now we're going to make sure you never get the chance to protect anyone again," the other woman said. That's when I realized this had never been about the money. They had taken the $50,000 from our first meeting, and they would take this $100,000 too. But what they really wanted was revenge. "Angela," I said, "you have the money. Just take it and go." "I don't think so," Angela replied, pulling out a gun. "You see, Margaret, we've decided that the only way to restore our family's reputation is to make an example out of you." The other 4 people also pulled out weapons, guns, knives, even a baseball bat. I was surrounded, outnumbered, and outgunned. But strangely, I wasn't afraid. Maybe it was because I knew the FBI agents were listening to every word. Maybe it was because I had faced these people before and survived. Or maybe it was because I was finally tired of being scared. "You know what, Angela?" I said, looking her right in the eyes. "I think you're all a bunch of cowards." Her face went red with anger. "What did you say?" "You heard me. You prey on lonely, vulnerable people because you're too coward to face anyone who might fight back. You killed James Martinez because he was trusting enough to fall in love with Sarah. You were planning to kill me because you thought I was just a helpless old widow." "Shut up," Angela snarled. "But you know what the real joke is? You're not even good at being criminals. Sarah's fake identity was sloppy. Rick's background check would have been easy to break if anyone had bothered to do one. And you, Angela, you left DNA evidence all over Michael's apartment when you broke in." I said, "Shut up. The FBI knows who you are. They know who your associates are, and they're probably listening to every word we're saying right now." Angela's eyes went wide, and she looked around the warehouse like she was suddenly realizing they might not be alone. "You're wearing a wire," she said. "Of course I'm wearing a wire. Did you really think I'd come here without backup?" That's when all hell broke loose. Angela screamed something I couldn't understand and raised her gun to shoot me. But before she could pull the trigger, the warehouse doors burst open and FBI agents swarmed in from all directions. "FBI! Drop your weapons! Drop them now!" The next few minutes were chaos. Angela's people tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. Shots were fired, but thankfully no one was hit. One of the men tried to use me as a human shield, But Agent Chen appeared behind him and knocked him out with what looked like a very professional martial arts move. When the dust settled, all 5 criminals were in handcuffs, and I was sitting on a crate trying to stop my hands from shaking. "Mrs. Williams," Agent Chen said, kneeling down beside me, "are you hurt?" "I'm fine, I said. "Just a little shaky." "You did great. We got everything we needed to put these people away for a very long time." Michael appeared at my side, looking pale but relieved. "Mom, I can't believe you called them cowards right to their faces." "Well, they are cowards," I said, "and somebody needed to tell them." As the FBI agents led Angela and her associates away, she looked back at me one last time. "This isn't over," she said, just like she had before. "Yes, it is," I replied calmly. "Your family's criminal enterprise is finished, and you're going to prison for the rest of your life. I'd say it's very much over." Agent Chen walked me to the FBI van, where paramedics checked me over to make sure I was okay. "Mrs. Williams," she said, "I have some good news for you." "What's that?" "We've been coordinating with law enforcement agencies in 5 other states. Based on the evidence we gathered tonight and the information these suspects will hopefully provide, we expect to make at least 12 more arrests over the next few weeks." "So this criminal organization is really finished?" "The part that was targeting people like you and your son?" "Yes, I believe it is." 3 months later, Michael and I attended Angela Torres's sentencing hearing. She received life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murders of James Martinez and 2 other victims. Her 4 associates also received lengthy sentences. Sarah Connor and Rick Morrison, who had been arrested trying to board a plane to Guatemala, were each sentenced to 30 years in prison for their roles in the conspiracy. As we walked out of the courthouse, Michael asked me how I felt about everything that had happened. "I feel proud," I said without hesitation. "Proud of what?" "Proud that we didn't let them win. Proud that we protected our family and helped protect other families too. And proud that we faced our fear instead of running from it." "Mom, I have to ask you something." "What's that?" "When you were in that warehouse, facing 5 armed criminals, were you really not scared?" I thought about that question as we walked to Michael's car. "I was terrified," I admitted, "but I was also angry, and sometimes anger is stronger than fear." "Would you do it again, if you had to?" "To protect someone I love. In a heartbeat." 6 months after Angela's sentencing, I moved back into my own house. The police had installed a new security system, and my neighbors had formed an informal watch group that kept an eye on everyone's homes. Michael had started dating again. A nice teacher named Jennifer, who had never heard of Sarah Connor and thought my story about stopping a criminal organization was amazing. I liked Jennifer because she didn't try too hard to impress me and because she made Michael laugh in a way I hadn't heard since before he met Sarah. "Do you think you'll ever be able to trust someone completely again?" I asked Michael one Sunday when Jennifer was over for dinner. "I think so," he said, watching Jennifer play with Mr. Whiskers in the backyard. "But I'm going to be a lot more careful about the questions I ask and the red flags I watch for." That's probably good advice for all of us. As I sit here now, writing down this story, I think about all the things I learned during those frightening months. I learned that love really can conquer fear when it has to. I learned that sometimes the best way to protect yourself is to stand up and fight back. And I learned that communities are stronger when people look out for each other. But most importantly, I learned that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing what needs to be done even when you are scared. Sarah Connor and Angela Torres thought they were dealing with easy targets, a lonely old woman and her naive son. They thought they could manipulate us, steal from us, and eventually kill us without anyone asking questions. They were wrong about all of that. And I hope that any other criminals who might be reading this story will learn from their mistake. Because there are Margaret Williamses all over this country. Mothers and fathers, grandparents and neighbors, ordinary people who will do extraordinary things to protect the people they love. We may look like easy targets, but we're not. We're families and we're communities. And we're stronger than you think. Don't underestimate us. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.